Welcome back to the marketplace. My name is Sandra Esimam Apel and I'm anchoring from home. In our first story this afternoon, the managing director of EcoBank Ghana, Daniel Saki, says the impact of COVID-19 has affected ways of doing business. In his view, banking services will never be the same even after the pandemic. He made this observation at a webinar organized by the bank earlier today.
Look, I think society will not be the same post-COVID era, even if a vaccine is found. And talking to a couple of individuals, we believe that one of the side effects or positive side effects of COVID-19 is drawing our attention to the basic hygiene factors. If for nothing at all, I think a lot more people have now imbibed, have now followed closely the hygiene factors, and you see people washing their hands more. So even COVID aside, I think that communicable diseases that are contracted through person-to-person infections can be limited because of the attention that we've had from some of the educational efforts that have gone on and are linked to COVID-19. As to whether it will be the same or not, if you link it, still staying in the health, and I'll attempt to have some basic ideas to what the health professional like Dr. Nkengasong does. I think the key thing is that how do we apply the lessons that we've learned from COVID-19? And I talked about hand washing, I talked about sanitizing, I talked about social distancing. The key thing is our ability to build health systems that are resilient. If we, by virtue of having to deal with COVID-19, there is greater investment in health facilities, then we would have a positive spin in terms of our ability to cope with similar effects that may come later. If I take it to the economic sphere, specifically into banking, banking will never be the same. One, for most of our clients, having been able to access the same services through the digital channels, it has been a game changer. It is true that most people were concerned about the safety of transaction online. Most people were concerned about the safety of accessing their accounts on their phones. However, COVID-19 accelerated that push because we did not have a choice but to transact on our phones. We did not have a choice but to access our accounts through digital means. For us, the banks, the game changer is that we have also been able to test our systems during this period. We have staff who have been able to work from home. We had to close our contact center for about 48 hours, and our staff were able to take calls in their various houses and still serve our clients.
He further added that clients will have to make use of digital platforms as banks adjust to the new normal.
In the first part, our focus was, apart from ensuring the health and safety of our staff and our clients, we also focused on granting clients access to their finances, access to their bank balances, access to be able to make basic transactions. And then you will then realize that working with other collaborators such as the telco, we granted access to funds either using the bank's mobile app or for third-party transactions, relied on connectivity to national platforms such as GIFs and other related platforms to be able to facilitate the transfer of funds from the accounts as we have it and into other third-party accounts held at other banks or through the mobile accounts held with the telco. So we had succeeded in one, ensuring safety, to allowing clients to transact at the basic level. Now, when I say we are at the second phase for we the bank, that second phase is how do we exist normally with COVID? And existing normally with COVID in this sense means that we now have to start conceptualizing that the digital investments we've made in our digital platform will now start serving the purposes for which they were made. We are focused on being able to serve and deliver services to clients using the mobile channels. Today, that preparedness is what has allowed us to scale to the second phase. One, to ensure that we can relate with our clients in their homes, in their offices. We have now had to exercise a new work environment. And in that new work environment, a certain proportion of our staff are at each time out of the office. So we then have to allow people to work from home and work from other destinations. For the bank in particular, that means that making sure that we have robust systems to ensure that when people work from home and access the systems, the bank's structures are not compromised. That means that adequate protection from cyber crimes. It also means educating our clients as to the importance of complying with the various safety measures that we have specified in their access.
The new normal is working from home, and I am Sandra Esinamapeno working from home. Moving on this afternoon, the co-founder of FinTech Chamber, Arnold Kavapu, believes the resumption of charges on mobile money interoperability and interbank transactions should have been extended to a later date to make room for businesses and individuals to recover from the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. The waiver on these charges expired last weekend. Let's now engage Arnold via Zoom to tell us more on this request or proposal that he is making. Arnold, thanks so much for joining me this afternoon on the Markets, please.
Hi, Sandra. Thank you, and always a pleasure to be part of your program.
Right, Arnold. So you agree with me that there are several interventions currently in place. For example, we have the stimulus package for businesses. Individuals have also have part of their utilities taken care of by government. So there is indeed some sort of support. Why are you calling for an extension as the only means of, trying to lessen the impact of the virus on individuals and businesses?
Thank you again. I think the fundamental thing is that, the digital financial ecosystem in Ghana is quite heavily integrated. So on the one hand, you have the banking partners, then you have GIPS, which operates both the interoperability platform as well as the platforms that allows banks to be able to do transactions. And then, of course, you have fintechs, the financial technology companies that make sure that these transactions do indeed take place. And so I think fundamentally the main thing has been there was some bit of signaling to industry, and this actually been well received. Indeed, if you look at a number of the initiatives that government have launched, I think we're beginning to see these things take hold. We're beginning to see the number of, for instance, we saw an uptick of between 40 to 70% increase in adoption for digital financial products. We've not fully assessed whether this was mainly because people were probably locked at home and there were no choices or options available to them, or whether it's primarily just because price, they were responding to the price reductions in these services. So I think what would have been quite useful is to, beyond the 3 months, if we could bear down some of those successes, and then for instance, things like the universal QR code that government launched, it would have been useful to see if we can totally go digital and use digital platforms to be able to advance our transformation agenda.
Arnold, is that an admission that the waiver helped in so many ways, and so extending it will further boost businesses and then also help individuals deal with the impact of the virus?
That is absolutely accurate. And indeed, I think if you look at the approach of government from the beginning till now, they've taken digital as the way to go. And these things are absolutely important because you look at the transaction cost of fiscal money, you look at even the cash as an agent of spreading coronavirus itself is a big constraint. So if this was the opportunity for us to be able to, for once and for all, just drive home digital channels and say digital is good as gold and is good as cash, and that indeed people could just rely only on these services, I think that would be that would have been like a great idea. I'm not saying that we've not achieved success, as I've said. We've seen uptake grow significantly during this period. I think what would be important is to see this streamlined and not just a one-off activity, and then suddenly people go back to business as usual. I think that, for me, is the biggest risks that we take when we begin to say, okay, we are de-emphasizing digital channels and those things that used to be the main incentives for people adopting these channels. We're taking them out, and it almost creates the impression that this is no longer a priority. This is no longer a focus.
Arnold, well said. I'm sure you're just fighting for businesses and protecting the consumer. But have you also considered the trouble government is going through, having to bear all this cost? I mean, COVID is having a toll on us. The health sector needs some sort of support. Testing people, it's free. And so with all this on the table for government, have you considered the impact? And mind you, revenue is also not coming in because our borders are closed. Goods are no longer coming in the volumes that they used to be. So it's just not too much, even though you're trying to protect the businesses that will bring in the revenue anyway.
I mean, absolutely, you make an important point, and I think the burden is shared also amongst all the participants in this. Indeed, for any business, there's a commercial consideration that needs to be made. People are taking haircuts. Some industries are really struggling under this virus. The key thing to remember is that businesses operate where customers exist, and when customers, their incomes are deteriorating, then that naturally affects their active participation in these models. And so businesses have to look at a commercial consideration as well. They have to look at market, because essentially you're a corporate citizen and you want to be responsible at that. So you want to be able to respond to the market when the market has challenges. You want to be able to sympathize with the market. And of course, there's also the part about government, which comes in the form of directives. And these directives are important. And businesses have to redesign their models. They have to, build special infrastructure to accommodate these directives and so on and so forth. I'm not making the case that this is not the way to go. I'm not making the case that probably we are insensitive to government costs and so on and so forth. But I think the key point there is, if this was a success, have we achieved those success? If this was like the big card, which was going to see Ghana evolve into a full digitized banking sector, have we achieved this goal? That opportunity that has been presented to us, is it something that we've achieved? I think that's fundamentally the point that I make.
Well said. Let's go back to the Momo charges now. Now that the waiver is off, what are some of the charges I'm likely to pay now on these digital transactions when I walk into the bank or also want to do my Momo transaction?
I think the real implications of that would come to a business decision, right? Everybody is going to assess whether they can, absorb these charges, whether they can still continue to exist or absorb these charges. That's relevant because, again, when you look at the reasons given by GAFES, they talked about sustainability. And if GAFES, which is 100% government-owned, is talking about sustainability, you imagine commercial entities that have to go to the open markets to get, funding at commercial rates. So there's a real cost to business as well. And to what extent they can absorb these costs is the question. But I think the obvious thing is once these things are being lifted, we expect that costs are going to be restored. In terms of the margins, in terms of the values that these costs take, it's always quite different from company to company. So for some mobile transactions, you have costs from 1% or even some of them are zero rated, up to 1.5%. So it depends on the transaction value. It depends on the organization you are engaging with, and so on and so forth, and also the amount that you are your transaction amount.
All right, Arnold, I want to say a big thank you this afternoon for joining us on the marketplace. And so we move on to other stories. An investment analyst, Mike Kobler, described decision by some international bank to ditch the cocoa loan syndication process as a sabotage. Let's hear from him.
My own reckoning is that because Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana came together and said they were going to process a certain quantity, about 50% of the raw bean, before it is shipped out to enhance the kind of revenue or income we make out of it. This is some kind of sabotage coming at the back of that. And I'm not surprised.
That we are being punished, our plan, setting of prices and even producing some locally.
Yes, I mean, without a shadow of doubt. I mean, obviously, once we enhance the raw materials into semi-finished goods, the prices goes up. and it is not to their advantage. So there's always been a calculated attempt to ensure that we stay where we are and become net exporters of raw materials, which does not have any value addition. So at the end of the day, we are short-changed as a country, because then once we export raw materials, we don't get the benefit of the value addition. And sometimes the price differential can be as much as 10 times, what we receive for the raw materials. And it does not inure to the benefit of the economy.
Public Interest and Accountability Committee is making a request for Parliament to call on the Ministry of Finance to account for utilization of 1.5 billion cedis from the Petroleum Holding Fund. According to the committee, the cash which was realized from the sale of crude oil and gas from the country's oil field has not been used appropriately. They are therefore calling on government and then Parliament to make available the Finance Ministry to account for these proceeds. Ebenezer Sabote joins me now on the phone lines for Bazo Mama Say for more. Eben, what more can you tell us about this request? Looks like we don't have Eben Sabote on the phone lines, but we do other stories. And travel and tour company Adansi Travel Limited has revealed that 46% of Ghanaians want to travel outside the country to various destinations within the next 6 months, according to a survey conducted by the company to gauge people's readiness to move beyond the country's borders. 86% out of the over 500 sample size on social media want to travel within the next 6 to 12 months. Let's hear from the marketing manager of Adansi Travel, Sewa Boating Bene.
Before COVID-19 got into the system, we had planned for a whole year's trip. We had local trips and we had international trips from January through to December 2020. We had to cancel all of these trips. We also have cancelled incoming tours. We had students coming in from Indiana University, and they had to cancel. And that was a huge amount of money they were bringing into our economy, about $100,000 and
That's
all of that. Apart from that, it's also our staff.
That's quite a lot. Did you have to make some refund?
Well, yes, we had to refund the deposit they made for the trip. I mean, they were coming to stay in hotels, they were coming to use rent buses, they were coming to eat in our local restaurants. So it's not just us. A lot of the industry, the hospitality industry, would have benefited from that incoming trip to Ghana.
Yes, go ahead, please.
As staff, we had to cut down on salaries. There is 19 of us, and we had to cut up to about 55% of salaries. But in general, most of our clients are waiting to travel when it's safe. Survey we did a few weeks ago, we asked clients how soon they wanted to travel. And the feedback, 46% of them said that within 6 months, if it is safe, they are ready to travel. 40% said that between 6 and 12 months, they will travel. 14% of them said that they will travel late 2021. And as I said earlier, over 2,000 of our clients, people that had already traveled with us, also want to travel when it is safe. We are aware that most countries are relaxing the restrictions on the COVID lockdowns. Dubai is opening up on the 7th to tourists. They have sent out guidelines on how to keep the tourists safe. And so we are monitoring all this around the world, including in Ghana here when it's safe and the airports are open, so that we can bring in people and also send people outside. And that is what inspired us to bring out our post-COVID travel.
Well, I'm sorry we are unable to bring you that report from Parliament by Ebenezer Sabote. We'll bring that story in our subsequent bulletins, especially on Business Live, where the Public Interest and Accountability Committee is making a request for Parliament to call on the Ministry of Finance to account for the utilization of 1.5 billion cedis from the Petroleum Holdings Funds. My name is Sandra Esinamapin. This is your Marketplace. I'm back at 5 p.m. with Business Live, and I've been doing this from home. Thanks so much for watching and have a good afternoon.